the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
What?
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor.
What difference at this point does it make?
Doesn't make sense.
If you're looking to make sense out of what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on Internet radio. And you can join the show and let your voice be heard by dialing 917-889-3675. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Friends, the entire world is experiencing food shortages. Supply chain breakdowns continue to have a domino effect on everything, especially food production. Farmers can't plant as many crops now because of fertilizer shortages, forced regulations, and of course, high fuel prices. This will cause more painful food shortages when we run out of the food we're eating now. You know, food takes time to grow. So when farmers don't plant, well, months later, we don't eat. That's why you need to prepare for an increasing number of food shortages. And the best way is to invest in Ready Hour emergency food from My Patriot Supply. It's a perfect hedge against skyrocketing prices and shortages. Right now, save $50 on a 4-week food kit from My Patriot Supply. Go to preparewithsouthernsense.com and get your $50 savings on a 4-week emergency food kits that average over 2,000 calories per day. That's preparewithsouthernsense.com. Those who know what's coming are getting prepared now. Well, if you don't want to type in that whole big thing saying preparewithsouthernsense.com and you're on my website, which is Southern Sense, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense, as in commonsense.com, you can easily click on My Patriot Supply and go directly to the website and get your $50 savings. As I'm telling you now, those who know what's coming are getting prepared right now. And shouldn't you? Prepare with southern-sense.com. That's southern-sense.com. Click on My Patriot Supply. Do it now. All right, and welcome back to another adventure here on Blog Talk Radio with Southern Sense. And I just lost the chat room. Oh, there it is. There it is. We got it. All right. Another Friday starting off right on the right foot. You're listening live on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, Global Enlightenment Radio, iHeart, YouTube, Stitcher. Yes, we're back on YouTube, Spreaker, Facebook, half a dozen other places. Also on our webpage, you can see my smiling face as we broadcast. Oh, just go to Southern Sense, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. Want to welcome those that are here in the chat room here on Blog Talk Radio, as well as those who are now joining us over at YouTube and Facebook. And if you do go to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Let's get the subscription numbers up since they're right now at 0. So, hey, guys, give me a boost here. Anyway, I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, along with my co-host, Curtis, Courageous C.S. Bennett. Good afternoon, Curtis. How are you?
I'm doing great. And as we were talking before the show, I'm ready to go work the polls Monday so we can get this show on the road. I'm just reading an article where the Dems have won had some victories in one of their primaries, and all of a sudden we don't have a chance. The Republicans, not expected to claim the House. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So anyway, I'm doing fine. Other than that,
that's called wishful thinking on their behalf. You know that? It's called wishful thinking. Considering Trump
they say that our chances are dim now because they won in a liberal state, So that's to be expected that they're going to have some victories
in their primaries, but not come the general election. No. How can he even declare, victory in a primary that hasn't even occurred yet? That's a good question, isn't it?
I'm telling you. They're grabbing for straws.
Oh, just because they say it doesn't make it true, Curtis, so don't get disheartened. Listen, we got ourselves a jam up show.
No.
Yeah. But they're going to push the narrative. They're going to push it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got ourselves a jam-up show. We have your friend, former Ambassador Stan Escudero, who served in multiple capacities under Bush 1 and Clinton. Yeah, I gotta think which Bubba I'm talking about.
Yeah. Middle East.
Yeah.
In the Middle East.
We have Harlan Ullman, who's returning. He's got his book out, The Fifth Horseman and the New Mad, How Massive Attacks of Disruption Became the Looming Existential Danger to a Divided Nation and the World at Large. That's a mouthful. But the book, it really, really outlines what is going on and how to move forward. I'm going to talk to him about that and several other things. Stefano Gennarini. He's the vice president for legal studies at the Center for Family and Human Rights. And he recently testified before the UN dealing with human rights and family rights. We got our friend Mark Tapscott. He's the DC correspondent for the Epoch Times, or Epoch Times, as he corrects me all the time. He's returning for his bi-monthly visit. And then E.J. Antoni is returning from the Heritage Foundation. He's the research fellow for regional economics at the Center for Data Analysis. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot that is going on. And guess what? The newest pandemic, there's another version of COVID out there. Ooh, we're all shaking in our boots. But that's not working. The narrative's not working. It's monkeypox. And how dare you say monkeypox? Oh, my goodness. Oh, Doug, I'm reading what Doug is putting in the chat room. He goes, he didn't realize it was Friday until I saw Ann, my little green light available. So thanks, Doug, on Skype. It says live southernsense.com gives me a clue that it's Friday.
He must be retired, because for retirees, every day is almost the same.
Well, I'm retired, but every day definitely is not the same. Jeez. Anyway, we do have a lot to talk about and a lot going on. We have that Inflation Reduction Act that is going before the Senate, or we should say the Inflation Not Reduction Act going before the Senate.
They're going to get it because they got the votes.
Well, they've also passed this.
And they got Kamala to fall back on.
Well, they also passed this new gun control bill, and that's going to be a huge, huge legal challenge because a basic semi-automatic firearm like the Glock 17 or 19, two of the most popular weapons used in law enforcement, would be banned under this bill. A semi-automatic.
They have no constitutional right.
A semi-automatic, say 22 long rifle, would be banned underneath this new legislation. It's going to have a huge legal challenge, and I pray that the Supreme Court gets it right once again. Yeah. Well, Doug's saying he's retired and busier than when he was working. And that's what most of us, that when we retire, find out. That ends up being the truth. That ends up being the truth.
It is.
Well, those that listen to our show know that we start off each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And I know in the past I've talked about, I know specifically this gentleman on a news article that I pulled up a couple of years ago. He passed away. So today's show is going to be dedicated to Navajo code talker Samuel Sandoval. He passed away on July 29th of this year at the age of 89. And this was in Associated Press, written by Felisa Fonseca. And she writes out of Flagstaff, Arizona. Samuel Sandoval, one of the last remaining Navajo code talkers who transmitted messages in World War II using a code based upon their native language, has died. Sandoval died late Friday, July 29th, at a hospital in Shiprock, New Mexico. His wife, Molula, said he was 98 years old. I've got to correct that because I've transposed the numbers on the description, so please forgive me. I will correct that. Hundreds of Navajos were recruited from the vast Navajo Nation to serve as code talkers with the U.S. Marine Corps. Only 3 are still alive today: Peter McDonald, John Kinsel Sr., and Thomas H. Begay. Code talkers took part in every assault the Marines conducted in the Pacific, sending thousands of messages without error on Japanese troop movements, battlefield tactics, and other communications critical to the war's ultimate outcome. The code, based on the then unwritten Navajo language, confounded Japanese military cryptologists and is credited with helping the U.S. win the war. Sandoval was on Okinawa in Japan when he got word from another Navajo code talker that the Japanese had surrendered and relayed the messages to higher-ups. The Navajo men are celebrated annually on August 14th. Sandoval was looking forward to that date and seeing a museum built near the Navajo Nation capital of Window Rock to honor the code talkers, his wife said. Sam always said, "I wanted my Navajo youngsters to learn. They need to know what we did and how this code was used and how it contributed to the world," she said that Saturday. That the Navajo language was a powerful and always to continue carrying our legacy. Sandoval was born in Nagazi, Nichaco Culture Natural Historical Park in northwestern New Mexico. He enlisted in the Marine Corps after attending a Methodist school where he was discouraged from speaking Navajo. He helped recruit other Navajos from the school to serve as code talkers, expanding on words and an alphabet that an original group of 29 Navajos created. Sandoval served in 5 combat tours and was honorably discharged in 1946. The code talkers had orders not to discuss their roles, not during the war and not until after their mission was declassified in 1968. The roles later became an immense source of pride for Sandoval and his late brother, Mero Sandoval, who was also a code talker. The two became talented speakers who always hailed their fellow Marines still in action as the heroes, not themselves, said Mero Sandoval's daughter, Jenny Sandoval. We were kids, all growing up, and we started to hear the stories, she said. We were so proud of them, and there weren't very many brothers together. Sandoval often told his story chronicled in a book and documentary of the same name, Nesba A. Bea, Heart of a Warrior at the Cortez Cultural Center in Cortez, Colorado. Sandoval's health had been declining in recent years, including a fall in which he fractured a hip. Malula Sandoval said his last trip was to New Orleans in June, where he received the American Spirit Award from the National World War II Museum. MacDonald, Kensel, and Begay were also honored. Navajo President Jonathan Nez said Sandoval will be remembered as a loving and courageous person who defended his homeland using his sacred language. We're saddened by his passing, but his legacy will always live in our hearts and minds, Nez said in a statement. Navajo Nation Council Speaker Seth Damon said Sandoval's life was guided by character, courage, honor, and integrity, and his impact will forever be remembered. And from the press pool at IndianCountryToday.com, this is a press release, and it reads, Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez, Speaker Seth Damon, and Vice President Myron Lizer offer their heartfelt condolences to the family and loved ones of Navajo code talker Samuel Sandoval, who passed away Friday, July 29th in the evening. As one of the 418 code talkers who served during World War II, Sandoval used the 813-word Navajo code to send and receive military communications in the South Pacific Theater. Born in 1922 in New Mexico, Sandoval was the Zuni clan and born for the Red Chief people. His maternal grandfather was Sleep Rock people, and his paternal grandfather were Badlands people. Navajo code talker Samuel Sandoval will always be remembered as a loving and courageous person who sacrificed more than we will ever know to defend our homelands using our sacred Navajo language. We are saddened by his passing, but his legacy will always live in our hearts and minds. On behalf of the Navajo Nation, we offer our prayers and heartfelt condolences to his wife Malula, his children, and many loved ones, said President Jonathan Nez. After graduating, Sandoval enlisted in the Marine Corps on March 26, 1943. He completed basic training at the Marine Corps Depot in San Diego, California, where the 29 original code talkers had arrived in September 1942. He served in 5 combat tours, including Guadalcanal, Bougainville, Guam, Palau, and Okinawa, and was honorably discharged on January 26, 1946. The Navajo people mourn the loss of a grandfather, father, brother, and uncle who dedicated his life to uplift communities. Navajo code talker Sam Sandoval lived a life where character, courage, honor, and integrity guided his journey. His impact on history will forever be remembered, and we sincerely share our love with his family during this time. May he rest among our most resilient warriors, said Speaker Seth Damon of Red Rock, Red Springs. Following his service with the Marine Corps, Sandoval returned home and enrolled in college to earn a certificate in substance abuse counseling. He worked in Farmington, New Mexico, as a counselor for many years. In the 1970s, he opened his own clinic named Tota Alcohol Counseling to assist Navajo individuals experiencing substance abuse. The facility served the region for more than a decade, assisting many families. Navajo code talker Samuel Sandoval was a great warrior and a compassionate family man. In every aspect of his life, he was a loving person who cared greatly for his people. Today, I ask our Dene people to keep his spirit and his family in your prayers, and we give thanks for his life and his legacy, said Vice President Lazar. Sandoval earned a Navy Unit Commendation Ribbon, a Combat Action Ribbon, a China Service Medal, a World War II Victory Medal, a Navy Occupation Service Medal with Asian clasp, and an Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with a Silver Star in lieu of 5 Bronze Stars. Earlier this year, Sandoval also received the 2022 American Spirit Award for Bravery by the National World War II Museum. Today's show is dedicated to Code Talker Samuel Sandoval. It is also dedicated to all the brave men and women that served in our military, from the birth of this nation through today and into our hopeful future. We also dedicate the show to the brave men and women that serve as our first responders, be they law enforcement, firefighters, or emergency services. May God bless each and every one. We dedicate to them this song by Todd Allen Herrington, My Name is America.
Born in the grip of oppression, I fought for my liberty. I paid with the blood of my people. Freedom has never been free. Now my door's always open to dreamers and friends. When I'm attacked, I protect and defend, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll get stronger, and I'll rise up from the flames, and I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. America is my name. My strength was not taken from others. Others gave it to me. They believe in the virtues I stand for, my respect for humanity. Now I'm challenged by tyrants who envy my power, but their vicious deeds become my finest hour, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll be stronger, and I'll rise up from the flames, and I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. America is my name. For those who need me, I'll always be here. For those who will harm me, I'll face without fear. But I'll always stay proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. I'm America, yes, America is my name. Is my
listening to Southern Sense live on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, Global Enlightenment Radio. Where the heck am I now? I forget. iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube, SHR Media, iHeartRadio. I just got the heck with it. Just go to the name of the show, put a hyphen in the middle. Southern-sense.com. Boy, am I messing this up? Southern-sense.com. Oh, man. I give up. I give up. Friday the 13th has to be coming around the corner right now. I can mess up a wet dream today. Oh, man. I'm your hostess, obviously with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie. And along with my Curtis Courageous, yes, Bennett. I give up.
I'm your Curtis, yes.
Take over, Curtis. I'm going home. Bye. I'm out of here.
No. We don't give up.
Oh, jeez. Well, we have to talk about, we're going to talk about later on, probably with the ambassador, about nasty Pelosi going over to Taiwan. I mean, did she accomplish anything, honestly? Did she really? It was a photo op. Yes, we need to show that we're not afraid of China, make them stand down, which they basically did. They're now carrying on live fire exercises in the passage between Taiwan and China, disrupting commerce. I mean, that's a huge economic hit. So, there's a lot of pros to it and a lot of cons to it. I think it could have been handled a lot better. And it could have been handled a lot better. And the Biden administration just completely wimped out on it. So, and then they did.
It showed to me, she had more courage than Biden, though. That's the only thing I see. Biden, he didn't want to face up to China. I think he wanted to capitulate, but she didn't, and she continued her trip. And that's the only thing I saw out of it.
Yeah, it showed that there is some backbone here in the United States. It's just not sitting in the Oval Office, and that's the big thing.
Right. Oh yeah.
And what is this now? Biden is now tested for the third time for COVID, even though he's wearing a mask. Well, at least when he's in public, he's wearing the mask when he's in front of the camera, half the time not. He's been vaccinated.
He's got the jab about 2 or 3 times.
He's got the boosters. He's got the vaccine. He's got the boosters. He's telling everyone to go get the vaccine so you don't get COVID. And yet he's managed to get COVID. This is now the 4th time?
Yeah, in a 2-week period. Yeah, it doesn't work.
It doesn't seem to work very well. No, it doesn't. No. I mean, I've got a dear friend of mine who's had the jab. He got COVID, and he's afraid of getting it back again. So, if it doesn't work, why do it? Just boost your immune system with natural vitamins and eating healthy and just being smart. Keep your hands washed, This may be our guest here in the chat room. Is it Curtis? Yes, it is. So let's bring on back to the show former Ambassador Stan Escudero. Good afternoon, Stan. How are you today?
Oh, better than I deserve. How are you?
Oh, geez. Now, what did you get yourself into that you don't deserve to have a good day? What trouble have you caused?
No, actually, I'm having a very good day.
Well, that's good, Ambassador.
Considering,
yes, how are you doing?
All right.
Considering all the craziness that is going on out there, you are the perfect person to talk to because we've got Iran claiming they've got nuclear capabilities. They're threatening to nuke New York City out of existence, making it a smoldering ruin. And wait a minute, isn't President Ibrahim, how do you pronounce his name? Rassini, supposed to visit the UN next month? Do you see a problem with this?
Well, the United Nations is an organization that that provides a forum for nations, representatives of all nations to come and talk. and Iran is a member of the United Nations, I don't see a problem with them having someone come to the UN. But I do see a problem with our policy toward Iran, specifically with respect to efforts to negotiate with the Iranians to prevent them from developing a nuclear weapons capacity. If you take a look at the Iranian position, beginning very soon after the revolution, which culminated in early 1979, they made no bones about what they wanted. They wanted eventually nuclear weapons, and they wanted them because nuclear weapons are a shield and a guarantee against threats or any kind of military interference by anyone else, even including great powers or superpowers. Once you have a demonstrated nuclear weapon, you are in effect protected. That's why India developed a nuclear weapon and set off an explosion at a place called Pokhara in 1974. They claimed that it was something that was intended to do construction, which nobody believed. But even if it was, the point is that once they set off a nuclear bomb, nobody was ever going to mess with India. And since then, of course, they've developed the capacity to make hydrogen bombs, and they have developed intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they are a full-fledged nuclear power. As soon as ever they could, after India developed their weapon, Pakistan developed one too. What will happen in the case of Iran is that they will, if nothing is done, they will soon have one. And the difficulty with attempting to negotiate this issue with them over the years is that negotiations really, diplomacy really in a case like this, is based on your ability to do one of two things. You either offer a credible threat, in this case to get Iran not to make nuclear weapons, or you offer them something they would rather have. Now, in the case of the Iranians, and I spent a number of years in Iran, I understand how they bargain. They are quite prepared to take whatever you will offer as preliminary chips toward potentially a negotiated solution to get them to do whatever it is you want, but in the end they may or may not do it. In the case of nuclear weapons, there is nothing you can offer the Iranians by way of diplomacy that they would rather have, because nuclear weapons are what they want. Now, the Obama administration made no effort to offer any sort of credible threat. They simply said, what do you want? What can we give you? And in the end, what they negotiated was, under this so-called JCPOA, it was an agreement which provided, in effect, a timeline, at the end of which, 2025 was the end of it, Iran could go ahead and develop a nuclear bomb if it wanted to, with the blessing of the international community. They simply had to agree not to do so for 10 years. Well, when Mr. Trump came on board, he took a look at this and he said, it makes absolutely no sense to do everything we did for Iran, give them billions of dollars and that sort of thing, only to have them put off for a few years the development of that which we do not want them to have in the first place at all. And so he began taking measures which seriously constrained their economy and constrained them in other ways, and it caused them very, very serious problems. When Mr. Trump was not reelected, the current administration resumed, to the degree that it could, the Obama administration's positions with regard to Iran, and they went and begged Iran to come back into the JCPOA, and the Iranians said, what will you give us to do that? And the Biden regime lifted the sanctions, or the great bulk of them, and promised a number of other things. And the Iranians said, well, we'll think about it. What else have you got? And in the meantime, they continued to work as hard as ever they could on the development of a nuclear weapon. The issue there was not how to do it, because a great number of scientists all over the world know how to make a nuclear bomb. The question was how to get enough fissile material, which they get through by taking uranium and putting it in the centrifuges. And the faster the centrifuges spin, for reasons I don't understand, I'm not a physicist, the more fissile the material becomes. And the farther along the path you get toward roughly 90% pure, the faster you can, the faster you increase the fissile nature, so that it takes quite some time to go from, say, 5% to 20%. But from 20% to 90%, it doesn't take that long. And I don't know why that's true, but it is. And so what the Iranians did was they put in newer, better, faster types of centrifuges, and they went ahead and got to the point where they almost had, and may in fact have, because so much of their nuclear facility or facilities in the various places they have it is shrouded underground and hidden from the view of UN inspectors or anybody else.
This is where I wanted to ask
to the point where they either have it or they almost have it.
Well, this
at
is where,
at the same time.
Well,
yes, go ahead.
This is where I wanted to ask you, because I pulled up an article that was on the MSN World News, and it was stating that the National Council of Resistance of Iran is asking that President Raisi is denied a visa to come to the United States, based upon a video on the Iranian state media that said Tehran could use its nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles to turn New York into ruins and hell in the case of a hostile act by the U.S. Now, there's also an Iranian journalist that reported that the underground facility in Fordo does house a nuclear deterrent program, and I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly, EMAD, E-M-A-D project.
Sorry, what was your question?
Well, the question is that should the President Raisi be denied the visa based upon what his government is doing and the fact that there is an actual underground facility that we know about that has this nuclear program that could possibly send an ICBM to the United States?
Okay. To my knowledge, the Iranians do not have an intercontinental ballistic missile with a range capable of reaching the United States at this point. They're trying to develop one. They do have one that would reach Europe, and certainly they have several that would reach Israel. But they do not have one, to my knowledge, that would go as far as the United States. Secondly, it's one thing to develop a nuclear bomb. It's another to develop one which will fit, which is small enough to fit on as a warhead on top of a missile. I have not seen anything to indicate that the Iranians have that capacity either. I suspect that what will happen is that when they think the timing is right, they will detonate a nuclear bomb somewhere out in the Dasht Kavir, in the great central desert in Iran. And they will claim at the same time that they have a great number of them, not just one, and that they have some which will fit as warheads on their missiles. Now, the latter two statements may or may not be true, but at that point it won't matter, because that will be their shield. And then they would go ahead and develop whatever it is they need still to develop. Frankly, my feeling is that the question of whether or not the Iranian is granted permission to come to speak to the United Nations is not so very relevant. My feeling is that the question is, should the Iranians be permitted to develop a nuclear weapons capacity or not? And I think this question needs to be addressed from the point of view not only of the United States, which is ultimately threatened by their capacity, whether they have the capacity to strike us now or not, but it's also a question that needs to be addressed by Israel. But let's take the United States first. Let's suppose that Iran goes ahead and develops a nuclear weapon and claims that it has the missiles and so forth, whether it does or not. The moment they develop a nuclear weapon, it will set off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Virtually every other country in the region that has anything like the ability or the money will begin either producing its own nuclear weapons or, more likely in the immediate future, purchasing nuclear weapons from Pakistan or North Korea. It is said that the Pakistanis already have an arrangement with the Saudis to provide a bomb in the event that Iran develops a bomb. I don't know if that's true or not, but the Saudi foreign minister mentioned something about it at one point in an unguarded moment several years ago. But in addition, you would have Turkey, you would have Egypt, probably Jordan, UAE, because all of these nations, first of all, they are Sunni and Iranians are Shia, and these two major elements of the Islamic faith have been at daggers drawn for 1,500 years. But in addition, when Iran is strong historically, it has been aggressive and expansionist. And all of those nations in that area would feel themselves threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran, so they would go and get them too. The Middle East is perhaps the most volatile area in the world, certainly one of. And the idea that a great number of the nations of the Middle East would suddenly acquire nuclear weapons is frightening.
Yeah.
Because obviously the larger the number of nations with nuclear weapons capacity, the greater is the likelihood that they will be used. So there is that. Now then, there is Israel. The Iranians have made no secret of their intent, if they can, to destroy Israel altogether. The Israelis regard it as an existential threat, the possibility that Iran might develop a nuclear weapon. Now, I think it unlikely that Iran would launch missiles and aircraft against Israel directly because they would want to avoid Israeli retaliation. The Israelis are well known to have nuclear weapons capacity. But I do think the Iranians would do everything they can to make small-scale nuclear weapons available to terrorists so that they could arrange indirectly to have Israel attacked with nuclear weapons in various ways and say that it wasn't them. They had nothing to do with it. The Israelis wouldn't believe this, but whether or not it would result in Israeli nuclear retaliation against Iran is simply not known. But I tell you honestly, I personally do not feel that Iran can be permitted to have a nuclear weapons capacity. Therefore, a way has to be found to prevent them from doing it. And given that they are almost at the point where they can, we have to give very serious thought, if we're the United States or Israel, to the destruction of their nuclear capacity. The Israelis would do this in a heartbeat if we would support them. I cannot imagine that the Biden regime would consider anything of the sort.
Yeah, you think?
it would go that they've done so far with Iran. But failing that, our planners have to begin considering now what we would do and how we would react and what steps we would take in the event that Iran did develop such a capacity and this produced, as I said it surely would, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
Well, you know what really scares me about Iran doing this nuclear capacity. If you remember correctly, a number of years ago, under the the Obama administration, Iran attempted to sail a nuclear submarine to our eastern seaboard. They didn't succeed. It didn't quite work out. But they're testing, no pun intended, the waters to see how they can be able to deliver such a system. And that's what scares me.
Well, I'm not aware that the Iranians have a nuclear-powered submarine, but they do have submarines. And there is the detonation of a nuclear weapon in the waters off the United States is a very serious threat. And in fact, the Russians have recently developed a kind of of self-guided torpedo, which can travel at very considerable speeds, and which can do so for long periods of time without necessarily being controlled. The object, as they say, is that such a thing could come within, because it's not so very large, it could come without being detected quite close to American seaports or coastlines, and then detonate a hydrogen bomb, which would create an enormous tsunami of radioactive water. And a few of those along our coastline would be absolutely devastating.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I imagine they would have something, but they don't have the capacity to do it now.
Going back to Israel, I believe whether the United States act or don't act in the case that Iran goes ahead and sell nukes to terrorists and they attack Israel, I don't think, all the denying in the world from Iran is going to stop Israel from attacking them too, as well as, going after the terrorists. And I say this because they had no problem attacking a U.S. warship, the USS Liberty, back in '67. So, if they would go against the United States and allies, I have no no doubt that they would really go after Iran full speed ahead.
They would, because they would regard it as a matter of survival. But they would much prefer to be able to do it with American support. The question is, as we seem to be getting much, much closer to the date when Iran will demonstrate that it does have a nuclear weapon, how long will the Israelis wait? Because if they once wait until Iran has a weapon, then they're faced with the same issue that everyone else is. How do you attack nuclear weapons power, particularly if you're a territorial small country like Israel, without being destroyed? They attacked the Liberty with some confidence that Lyndon Johnson wouldn't do anything about it, and of course he didn't. He covered it up. But it's hardly the same thing with respect to Iran.
Now, just a little bit of turn of the page, because the whole Middle East area is so volatile, but we just ended up killing the al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul. But what's coming out is that we're finding that al-Qaeda and the Taliban have now linked up because of the home that he was found in, that he was staying in Kabul. This is really scary that we walked out of Afghanistan, leaving all this equipment in the hands of our enemies, and now we have a power vacuum. Or what is going to happen here now in Afghanistan with al-Qaeda and the Taliban? What do you foresee?
Well, this was entirely predictable. The way in which Joe Biden left Afghanistan virtually guaranteed, given the level of weakness that he showed and the amount of weaponry that he left behind, virtually guaranteed that the Taliban and ISIS Khorasan and Al-Qaeda and other lesser terrorist organizations would all come together in Afghanistan and would plot and plan there in whatever way they wanted. In the case of Ayman al-Zawahiri, he was staying in a guest house that belonged to the Haqqani family. The senior Haqqani is the number 2 or number 3 man in the Taliban hierarchy for the whole country. And while the house belonged to, I believe, his brother, that's immaterial. The thought that Haqqani didn't know, and therefore that the Taliban didn't know, is absurd. Of course they knew. It speaks to our capacity to discover things and act on the basis of them, even in faraway places like Afghanistan without any nearby bases, that we were able to take out al-Zawahiri without doing much damage to anything else. But that's one man. And Al-Qaeda is more than one man. It is a structure which which has people at lower levels who will step up and replace. Keep in mind that he was 71 years old. He had long gotten past the point where he was going to be an active leader. He was never a charismatic fellow like bin Laden. He was a backroom boy, a planner, a crafty chap. When I was ambassador in Azerbaijan, we almost caught him. He was the head of an outfit called the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. And we discovered that they were using a spot in Azerbaijan as a safe house. And there was a plan for he and the 4 other senior leaders to come and use that place. And we worked with the Azeris, waiting until they all showed up. And then we were going to grab them. Unfortunately, al-Zawahiri and one other fellow decided at the last minute not to come. So we took the other 3. And they told us a great deal of what we wanted to know before we gave them to the Egyptians. But he was somebody we have been after, obviously, for a long, long time.
Well, now, as you said, because of his age, there had to have been someone chosen as his successor. So my question was, there should not be a power vacuum. I mean, someone's already stepping in and acting as the head of it. It only makes sense, right?
There is no vacuum within Al-Qaeda that I'm aware of. They will have had someone who was to take his place in the event that he had a heart attack or was assassinated or whatever. Keep in mind, a few years ago when President Trump was in office, he had al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, hunted down and killed. And within a matter of hours, ISIS announced that his successor was already in place. Mm-hmm. Of course, President Trump, and so his successor was also dead within 24 hours. After which ISIS did not announce another successor. But I haven't heard that we have struck anyone else in the Al-Qaeda structure in Afghanistan or anywhere else. So yeah, I think there's no question but whether they will work with the Afghans, and we gave them a great deal of technical capacity to do so, not just the weaponry, but all kinds of other gear and communications systems and so forth, which were left behind at the various of the 9 bases we had in Afghanistan, some of which was taken over by the Chinese, and some of which the Taliban still have or have distributed to others. In fact, it's sort of amusing in a sad kind of way that we are talking now about trading back to the Soviets for Miss Greiner, an arms merchant whose name is Victor Bout, and Mr. Bout has been in prison for some years because he sold weapons of war to, among others, the Taliban. And Mr. Biden gave the Taliban $83 billion worth of weapons. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wonder if someday couldn't be a cell next to that of Mr. Bout for Mr. Biden, but there you are.
Well, you need an agent to sell for you. So hey, here's one. Let's pluck them out of the American prison because they're too stupid to know what they have on their hands, or because the president of the United States at this point is so brain dead that they're willing to turn around and a merchant of death. We'll pay him a really great commission. Just help us move this merchandise so that we can spread more terror and then, end the great Satan, the United States. Brilliant. The craziness coming out is...
I wish the problem were just President Biden.
Yeah.
But it really isn't. Mr. Biden he's a figurehead. I mean, his mind is simply no longer up to the challenge. But if you take a look at all of the catastrophes, the cascade of catastrophes which has resulted from his policies, you have to conclude that this cannot be a coincidence. No government, not even Biden's government, is so thoroughly incompetent that every single thing that it does harms the country it's meant to be governing.
Thank you.
What
Thank
we're
you.
seeing,
That's
what we're seeing is the result. What we're seeing is the result of a very broad-based plan. I don't want to say conspiracy, but that's sort of what it is, which has been the goal of the left for quite some time and is now being exercised in a serious and, from point of view of the United States, existential way to weaken and transform the United States from the free capitalist society which it has been for over 200 years into what will become a rather miserable socialist totalitarian oligarchy.
That's exactly where I was going.
The country is a risk.
That's exactly where I was
great
headed.
risk.
Yes, and we have united our enemies. We have allowed the socialist left to move us more and more into a socialistic society, the woke society, to shame us, to take us down through the media, through the social networks. We've allowed them to brainwash our children to raise little liberals. They've separated the families, taken the kids away from the parents. The parents are too stupid, so we're going to tell you what's right and then tell your parents how stupid they are. That's our new society. In the interim, we have allowed China to infiltrate our corporations, our government offices, our political offices, to influence our policies. We have allowed the Muslim Brotherhood to take over our universities, as well as the Chinese take over our universities and help us swing us more and more left. They have gotten our technology. They have gotten our intellectual properties. And we have sat back, and this is what we got. We are now being transformed. The United States no longer being the republic, but it's a shadow government pushing us further and further left. Am I being correct or not?
Unfortunately, you are. And, I mean, thank God for Donald Trump. Thank God for Ron DeSantis. I mean, here in Florida, we live in a bastion of freedom. And we might be able to sustain that, provided we can prevail in the elections this fall and in 2024. If we cannot, Florida will not be able to sustain itself for long against the power of the federal government, which is overwhelming at this point. And frankly, I'm concerned that we Republicans, we on the right, have become overconfident. There is a great deal of discussion about the coming red wave and so forth and so on. Elections always tighten up as you get closer. The Supreme Court decision to do away with Roe v. Wade at the federal level and return the question of abortions to the states provides leverage for the left, and an issue which will and which has aroused the ire and the energies of a great number of women who are pro-abortion and other liberals. And I fear that the kind of confidence that we have expressed in the inevitability of a right-wing victory will become overconfidence in the fall. We need, if we are to develop a base which will make it possible to preserve the United States in its traditional form, we need the largest possible range of victories this fall. And I'm not talking now just about retaking the House of Representatives. That we may well do. But we also need to take the Senate, and there are more Republicans up than there are Democrats in the Senate side. Normally, historically, the side with the largest number of seats up loses seats, and we need to gain seats. Beyond that, we need to win governorships. We need to win control of state legislatures. We need to win control of school boards and county councils and city mayors. We need, from the top of the ballot all the way down to the bottom, the widest possible range of victories, and we need to sustain that in 2024, and ideally for 4 years after that, because The challenge in front of us is not just regaining control of our political structure. It is seriously undertaking the restoration of America in terms of our culture. Now, I speak now of academia, of course, but also entertainment, communications and media, elements of business, a great wide range of things which, as you say, have become to some degree dependent upon or influenced by China or others, but which simply no longer support the fundamental bases of Americana and argue in favor of something new and different. But in this case, it's a modern version of socialism, without being willing to recognize that socialism is contrary to nature. It has never worked. It never will work. But it will be very destructive of non-socialist societies. It will be very destructive of economies and very destructive of human life. And that will happen here, too, if they take over.
Well, it's been slow and it's been insidious, but if we can turn around and remove the Chinese influence, the Muslim Brotherhood influence, the socialistic influence, or we can try to do that, but it's not going to work unless we take out the shadow government. That's the agencies that at a whim can take what is a recommendation, turn it into a regulation with the power, full power of a law. These faceless bureaucrats that run these alphabet soups. So, you can change Republican or Democrat, but unless we weed them out, nothing's going to change.
Well, there is a serious conundrum here. Obviously, we need the executive branch of government to implement the laws, to support and sustain whoever is president, to conduct our intelligence activities, do everything which it now does. The sad thing is that over the past several decades, beginning at least in the 1990s, and to some degree before that. I mean, you could start in modern terms from 1965, from Lyndon Johnson's time, the passage of the new immigration bill and the creation of the Great Society and so forth. But the point is, during those decades, what had been a politically neutral executive branch, civil service, and foreign service, for that matter, became increasingly politicized to the left.
Yep.
In part through the rise of public service unions, in part through the educational process, and the absorption of the leftist line, which began to be more consistently put down by our media during the period of the Vietnam War. Until now, what you have is a politicized and in many ways highly corrupted executive branch of government, of civil service, and so forth. You see this in the FBI. You see it in the intelligence agencies. I think that if we are able to win and take significant control of Congress in 2024, one of the things that the president will have to do is create a civil service czar, whose function will be to develop a range of civil service reforms necessary to restore to the civil service that neutrality, which was at the core of the reforms instituted by Andrew Jackson when he took what was then back in the 1830s a highly politicized civil service and transformed it into something which was rather more neutral. And then there have been a number of reforms since then, but these have gradually eroded away, and they've got to be replaced because the civil service has shown, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, what have you, they have shown in their unrestrained opposition, for example, to President Trump while he was president, and the various steps that they took, which were perhaps illegal, but certainly what should I say, not in keeping with the law and the mission of the civil service. There is every reason to believe that they would do that again if Mr. Trump were reelected, or if Ron DeSantis were elected, if Mr. Trump decides not to run, or something like this. That cannot be permitted to continue to happen because particularly over the decades, the Congress has itself consciously given over so much of its authority to the executive branch. If you look at many of the laws that have been passed, there's a little paragraph in there somewhere toward the end which basically says, whatever this law says, the president doesn't have to do it if he regards that ignoring it is in the national security interest of the United States. And the various elements of the EPA, for example, have undertaken wide ranges of regulatory establishment, often based on the flimsiest possible interpretations of the laws. And these interpretations have given them what amount to legislative power. And the Congress has to regain that power, because if the Congress doesn't have it, the people don't have it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend of mine, he wrote a book about this, lost his business. He had a lab that did cancer testing because of a ABC agency that said that this recommendation now has the powerful power of a law with the full penalties of monetary fine and possible jail time. Now, when does a recommendation become a regulation, and the regulation having the full faith and power of a full-fledged law passed by Congress, and then have penalties, financial as well as penal? I mean, come on. Why isn't this challenged? Why haven't we challenged this to the point where we've torn the heart of that out? You take away that power from these bureaucrats, these faceless little bureaucrats that sit behind a desk and are just laughing and rubbing their hands together going, oh, who could we screw today? That's what's happening. That's what's happening to the American public.
I suspect that it wasn't challenged because it operated to the benefit of whichever party was in power at the time. If you're in power and you want to create certain regulatory controls which benefit your philosophy or your donors or whatever, you don't want to give that power over, particularly at a time when, as has been increasingly the case for the last several decades, the Congress has become more and more politicized and partisan, so that it's harder to get laws passed that would do what you would want. And gradually, the capacity to legislate has shifted as a practical matter, not a legal matter. That is to say, it's not, technically speaking, a law, but it has the power and effect of law, and that has shifted from the Congress, where the Constitution places it, into the executive branch, and in particular, given the size and scope and complexity of the executive branch, into the hands of politically appointed officials who are at the top of the various departments of government, and their permanent civil service bureaucrats who work under them, to the degree that they have become politicized, as I say, then the regulatory rules that they devise, and these are smart people, the rules they devise have become increasingly constraining and controlling.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. The point is to constrain and to control. Once you remove the person's freedom to the point where they don't even recognize the fact that they once had freedom, you have complete control. And that's what they want. You know, you have now, the perfect example was the mask mandates. It was the CDC recommends. Next thing you know, it's a mask mandate. You can't enter, you can't I'm trying to think of the proper word. You cannot enjoy services and goods if you're not wearing your mask. Oh, heaven forbid you want to sit down and have a meal and you go to move your mask down to take a bite. Oh, my goodness. You're going to be kicked out. They're going to call the police on you and have you handcuffed, as we saw in New York City. You know, you have the military that is being forced to take a jab on an experimental drug, which is exactly the opposite of what the CDC recommendation is. But no, this thing has now become law. And if you don't do it, you lose your job, you lose your pension, you lose your health benefits, and you probably lose your wife and kids. Yeah, it has gotten so out of hand.
The question is, do mayors or governors or others actually have the power to impose these mandated controls without some action being taken by for example, a state legislature, if you're talking about a rule for a given state. And that issue wasn't raised at the time, but it needs to be raised the moment it appears, because in truth, even with a pandemic like COVID, which could have been a lot more deadly than it was, because after all, we have a great number of people who are dead, but they're dead with COVID, not necessarily from COVID. The people need to recognize that the threat to their freedoms and their liberties is far greater than the threat which results from failing to observe a mandate like masks, which don't really provide much protection anyway, against something like the Wuhan virus. But the part of the problem is that traditional pillars which supported and strengthened and guaranteed the future of our society have been consciously weakened over the decades, particularly things like the family or religion. And this goes back, this can be traced as a calculated Marxist goal. It goes all the way back to the early part of the 20th century. There was an Italian philosopher who most people have never heard of, a Marxist philosopher. His name was Antonio Gramsci.
Yep.
And he argued that Lenin wasn't entirely right, that it's one thing to be able to seize power for socialism via revolution, but a revolutionary government is always at risk of counter-revolutionary strikes from the right. What you must do if you're going to take power and preserve the power is have the people want you to keep that power. And the way to do that is first weaken the traditional pillars of society. In his case, he was talking about Italy. And so he was talking about the Catholic Church. He was talking about families, but he was also talking about newspapers and book printing and early radio and that type of thing, because this was when he was writing these things, it was during and even before the First World War. But his point was that as you take control of these things, you begin to insert only your own ideas and your own philosophy and your own thought into these things. And over time, the people will come to think the way you do. And when that happens, you make sure that only your philosophy and your thoughts are permitted and acceptable, and the people will think the same way you do. Now, there will be some who don't, but by and large they will. And once you have that, once you have achieved that, there will be no significant threat of counter-revolution, because the people will want what it is that you have to offer without thinking rationally about the nature of it or of any alternatives. This is, after all, what George Orwell wrote about.
Yeah, 1984, yep.
And for Gramsci's philosophy was taken up by a great number of people in other Marxist philosophers in Europe, many of whom fled to the United States in the run-up to Nazi takeover of Germany. And they began, as you said, the insidious infection of our academe, of our universities and what have you, so that you had from this group called the Frankfurt School when they first came to this country. You had people like Herbert Marcuse going out to California and teaching out there. One of his students, a man named Derek Bell, coming up with the concept, not just of critical theory, which is what Marcuse called it, but critical race theory, adding the racial consideration. Bell, of course, was black, and as the concept of critical race theory began gradually to take hold, and it now has blossomed into a major aspect of leftist philosophy, you had the left overcoming in our country a major problem, which was that our society was sufficiently responsive to the needs of its people, so that the union movement did not bring about a revolution as it helped to do in Europe. Instead, it brought about extraordinary changes in which many of the needs of the working class were satisfied. Union movement was successful in this country. They needed something else to divide us so that we would be easier to deal with, and they seized upon race, and it's working very well.
And now they throw in the gender component, so you've got race and gender. And, well, I'm sorry, there's not 59 different flavors of the month. The good Lord said man and woman. But the second you say that, oh, you're homophobic. I mean, how do you get from point A to point Z? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's male and female. Well, how you decide to enjoy your sex, that's your problem. Behind a closed door, I don't want to know about it.
Exactly. You can deny biology if you want to, but homosexuality has been with us, as far as I know, as long as there have been human beings. There is what you would call homosexual behavior amongst chimpanzees, and if you believe in evolution, I would assume that the hominids from which modern man developed, modern humankind developed, so as not to leave out women, that there was some homosexuality there too. There certainly is now. So what? That does not alter the biologic fact that there are men and there are women.
Yeah.
The suggestion that men can get pregnant is absurd.
Well, tell that to Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie. No, all of a sudden that becomes fact. Fiction becomes fact. You know, when I saw that movie, I said they're opening the door. Hollywood is prepping us so in about 5 to 10 years, this is going to be completely acceptable. That men can become pregnant and women can become men. No. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
X or XY gene. You can't change the genes. But that's...
No, you are what you are. I mean, of course, a woman who transforms herself mentally and behaviorally into a man is still physically capable of becoming pregnant. So to the degree that if you say a trans woman is a man, okay, but internally that woman still has the physical capacity to become pregnant and can. If you argue that that's a pregnant man, well, all right. But that doesn't alter the biology of it.
Mm-hmm. But what gets me is that the way they are transforming society, and Hitler was really good at this. He knew that if you got the kids very young, you got them away from the parents, which is why he started kindergarten. Get the kids away from the parents, put them into a public school system where you can indoctrinate them, you can change society, which he did, and which is what they are doing now. You get the kids as young as possible, convince them that a boy isn't a boy and a girl isn't a girl, and your parents are stupid, and you change society. And they're doing that. But I'm starting to feel a pushback because there's a segment of our society that still is keeping their wits about them. And I'm seeing it come up from the youth. And I'm praying it might be the salvation of this nation to push back on this leftist ideology that threatens to rip us apart.
Well, Lenin did the same thing in the Soviet Union with the young pioneers on the Komsomol. As he began indoctrinating children, one of the first things he did was take over the Ministry of Education after he overthrew the Tsar. But, yeah, there is a pushback against this movement. But whether or not it will be successful is not clear. Because once again, we have to take control of the political structure, and then we have to find ways to undercut the power of the teachers' unions, which seem to be the primary pushers at this point of this kind of distorted. I'm not even sure what word you would use to describe it, a single word, but this distortion of biology in order to make that kind of concept normal to future generations. It is not normal. That doesn't mean it should be disparaged. If that homosexuality should be disparaged, what should be disparaged is trying to teach young children that they need to consider whether or not they are homosexual when they're still children. They're not sexual at all.
No.
And they won't be until they reach puberty.
No, even beyond, because the New England Journal of Medicine a number of years ago reported that the human brain is not fully sexually developed until the age of 27. And yet 90% of the kids who question their sexuality, by the time they hit 18, graduating high school, they have decided what side of the fence they sit on. And 90% are heterosexual. And this indoctrination, these children are then, at a young age, being allowed to alter their bodies physically and make permanent damage. We have no idea at what point these hormones and all these other things will do to these children. Now they go through these surgeries. I saw an interview of a poor woman. She's now addresses herself as a man, but she regrets now having done that at a young age. And her regret is that I'll never have kids because everything has been surgically altered. And she feels like a woman, but she's now surgically in a man's body. I mean, the damage we're doing to our kids and our future generations is untold. But what, Ambassador, is the main point of this? Wait a minute, population control.
I'm sorry, is what?
Population control.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there are elements of the Green Movement and others in the far left who argue that it's not just a question of controlling the population. It is also the need to reduce the numbers of humans. That there are simply too many people in the world, and that ways have to be found to reduce that number. And they're not arguing for something like I don't know, extermination, but they're arguing for various kinds of industrial modification, which would have the effect of preventing societies from supporting the numbers of people they have at present, which would mean that there would be larger numbers of deaths due to disease, perhaps starvation. One assumes there would be fewer children. I don't know. I was thinking about this a while back, and I thought that maybe from their point of view, they might conclude that the true answer, the way to reduce the numbers of people at a time when they still have the power, would be mass suicide. And I suppose from their perspective, there would be something to that. But I think if they are going to advocate this, then it's incumbent upon them as the geniuses who figured it out to show us the way. And while I wouldn't have the courage to follow their example, I would certainly contribute to a statue that might be built in their honor.
You have a good sense of humor. Thank you, sir. There's so many things that are going on within our society, because even with the vaccine, we're finding some of the side effects of the vaccine. Men become sterile, women have miscarriages. Oh, but let's throw in the pro-choice movement that just had a nice win in Kansas. Hey, listen, no, abortions are perfectly fine. Well, what would you say if your mother had decided to have aborted you? Wait a minute, that's right. You wouldn't have a voice because you wouldn't exist. And yet Your very existence
Certainly true, and a
was
good
based
part of the,
upon a pro-life
a good
choice.
part of the issue seems to be a good, again, being male, this is not something that I address directly, but it does seem to me that a good part of the issue, as is discussed at present, seems to be one of timing. That is to say, is it all right to have an abortion in the first trimester, or how about the end of the second trimester? What about right before birth? Or even suppose the intent is to abort the baby, but it somehow gets born anyway, and there it is lying there and it's alive. Is it all right to go ahead and abort the baby after it comes out of the mother alive? I mean, isn't that murder? But let's take it a little further. Suppose the baby is alive and it's lying there. The doctor is about to complete the abortion when there's an emergency of some sort. He's called out of the operating room and says, "Well, I'll be right back." And so they make the baby comfortable and they wait. And 2 or 3 hours later, the doctor comes back. Well, now this baby has been alive for several hours. If the doctor goes ahead and kills it, is that still an abortion? Suppose the mom thinks, "Gee, I can't, this little baby is alive. I'm not real sure. Let me think about it." So she stays in the hospital for a day or two, and then at the end of that time, she says, "Well, yeah, go ahead." Okay, well, now the baby's been alive for 2 or 3 days. It's still abortion. Suppose she takes the baby home, and, she waits 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 years, until the kid is a teenager and really a problem, and then she wants to abort. At what point do you come to the end of the period when it is acceptable, if you're going to agree that it's acceptable at all under any circumstances? At what point do you come to the end of the period where it ceases being abortion and starts being murder? Let's suppose that Hillary Clinton's mother was still alive, and she decided now that all these centuries, all these decades ago, she wasn't really sure she wanted Hillary at the time, and now she decided she doesn't want her anymore. Well, when they drag Hillary off to the hospital to complete the abortion, is it an abortion? It becomes absurd. It's something which has been addressed technologically over the years as technology improved, and you were able to determine that as the fetus was younger and younger and younger and younger, it still had elements of life about it. It could feel pain. It could try to avoid the vacuum device or the other things that were being done to it in the womb. It seems to me that the only rational decision to make is that, in light of current technology and the direction of that technology, that life begins at the moment of conception. And then all the questions of timing go out the window. Because if you have a conceived fetus, then you have a conceived fetus. And you could argue that the woman may not want to carry the fetus to the point of birth. She should have thought about that when she was having sex. There are any number of different means of birth control. And rape, incest, that type of thing, certain types of diseases or other things might be issues that could be addressed within that context. But generally speaking, actions have consequences.
Yeah.
And that's true for sex as it is for something like bank robbery.
Exactly. There's so much more to be said about, the pro-life movement. And I have to admit, I actually made a T-shirt, and I really do have to put this up on our website. It said, "I thank God my mom chose life." And there's a lot to be said with that. Every time I see these women protesting for pro-choice, I'm like, what would you be able to protest here now today if your mother chose the abortion? You know, you think about that. You would not have a voice. You would not exist. And they
Well,
just don't get it.
in the period from Roe v. Wade in 73, wasn't it, that it was decided, until the present, there have been approximately 65 million successful abortions conducted in the United States. That is a hell of a lot of deaths. I mean, Hitler only killed 6 million Jews.
Yeah.
Stalin killed about 20 million people. Mao is said to have been responsible for the deaths of some 70 million Chinese. So we're getting close to the world record if you regard abortion as death. And that's a hell of a thing to say about a country like the United States.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, Ambassador, it has been a lot of fun to have you with us. How can people find you and learn more about you?
Well, I'm retired. I don't have a blog or anything like that. I write things for Republican Party clubs over here in Volusia County where I live. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a public figure.
I'll just keep inviting you back, Ambassador.
I beg your pardon?
I'll just keep inviting you back.
Well, by all means, and I can do statements. I speak to local clubs over here in the Volusia area and that sort of thing, and I did a regular radio show over here for a time on one local station, but the chap who was running it passed away, and so I'm really not. I'm really not as active publicly, but I'm 80 years old. I'm getting to the point where I'm not as active in that sort of way as I used to be. And again, frankly, we had a discussion today about politics largely in the United States and American foreign policy, and that's fine. But people often want me to speak about my career and that sort of thing, and things that I did in various revolutions and wars and what have you. And I generally don't do that. I've turned down a request to do an HBO documentary. I turned down a couple of things from universities, well-known national universities, to write something for them on my career. I just, when I came aboard, I took an oath not to reveal classified information, and while it's been decades, still it's something that it's an oath that I think I should keep. So I don't have the kind of public persona that I might have.
Well,
No
you are
kiss and tell here, huh?
a font of information, though. That is for true.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, we've got our next victim up there. So, Ambassador Stan Escudero, it is always a pleasure to have you with us. And we welcome you back anytime. And if there's something you want to talk about, you get a hold of Curtis and say, get me on the show, Curtis. All right? We'll be happy to have you.
Okay, fine.
All right.
Thank you very much. I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, take
All
care.
right.
All right.
All right, take care.
All right, Ambassador
All right.
Stan Escudero. We have our next victim on the line. He's new to the show. He's a fellow paisano, Stefano Gennarini, if I can even say my name. Oh, no, wait a minute. Am I getting this out of order? No, it is Stefano, right?
That's me, yes.
All right, my co-host put the wrong name in there. That's what he did to me. He messed up my studio. Shame on you, Curtis.
I jumped the
Shame
gun.
on you.
My bad.
Oh, man. I'm trying to find my notes now. I just got myself a little turned around here. You are with the Civil Society for the Family. The website is c-fam.org, correct?
Center for Family and Human Rights, yes, or CFAM, as we're known.
All right. Now, I watched the video of you testifying before the UN. Boy, you socked it to him. This was for the sustainable development. The second I hear the word sustainable, the hackles on the back of my neck go up like crazy. Please explain what you were speaking and addressing the UN about.
I think you're referring to the recent meeting of the Commission on Population Development this spring, and it's a commission that meets annually to discuss population and development. That is, how populations affect population issues, population policies affect development. As you can imagine, as there's been more and more a focus on sustainable development in recent years, by that meaning development that does not harm the earth or the environment, or that respects the environment, that there's been a focus on that. And so, some people think that, everyone should stop having children in order to prevent the earth from exhausting its resources. And we often find ourselves at the UN arguing against that line of thinking and saying that in actual fact, human beings are a resource themselves, and human ingenuity is going to carry us through any environmental issues that we may encounter.
Well, yeah, these same brain surgeons are the ones that also say that cow farts are poisoning the planet. I'm sorry. It is a way of population control, and it's the only way you can look at it. Sustainable environments, they want to shove you into these urban areas where you live, work, and die within this 1 or 2 block area. No more gasoline cars, and you're either on a bicycle, a public transportation, or these highly pollutive electric vehicles.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Sustainable development is just a way for governments to pick economic winners and losers. It seems everyone's on board now, though. That seems to be the issue. And so oftentimes we can't even argue against this line of policies, but we find ourselves simply having to sort of do damage control. So, for example, even in the context of population policies, we find ourselves saying, well, if you're actually interested in creating development that is sustainable, that is green, if you like, environmentally friendly, then the most important thing is to have enough people to sustain a new green economy. And very often, the big companies are not investing in new green production methods, or even governments are not investing in new energy resources, simply because they're never going to be able to make the return on their investment. And that's because of demographic issues. That's because there aren't going to be enough of us paying for that green renewable energy in the long run for those who make the initial large investment to develop it in the first place to make their returns.
Well, I think it's, as you had it open correctly, that it's a scam. You've got someone that has a way to make extra money and gain power because of this new green idea, whether it's an electric car, solar panels, or some other new development. There's always follow the money. And if you follow the money, then you find what the actual truth is behind these Green New Deals, which is no deal at all for the regular average person like you or I.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, the biggest losers of the green economy or this green revolution are going to be the poorest amongst us, but also the poorer countries, because they're the ones who are going to be saddled with a huge bill for renewable energy technologies, and all the money is going to wealthy developed countries, and the poorer countries who are furthest behind are going to have to scale up their technologies, without ever having had a chance to develop the old-fashioned way in the first place.
Now, they use this idea of population control, and they say it's to help to make everything more equitable. But it has the exact opposite effect, doesn't it? I mean, you're going to have either the very elite And then you're going to have the bottom of the ladder who have to serve the elite. There's no middle class at all if you do population control.
Well, you'll find that population control policies are usually used against minorities, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and we've seen this happen everywhere. It was in India, the Hindu majority tried to use it on the Muslim minority. In China, it's now being used by the Han majority against the minority Turkic populations in the western part of China. And it's the same across Africa and other places, even in Latin America. Whenever you hear of forced sterilizations or even coercive sterilizations or even incentivized sterilizations and long-term contraceptives, it's generally governments inevitably use it against for their own gain, and it tends to affect political minorities more than anybody else, even though most of the money for this kind of policy is coming from Western countries, including from the United States.
Now, that's the ironic part. We are the source of our own demise. Are we not?
Well, according to Elon Musk, yes. I mean, the biggest threat to civilization is population decline. We've never seen the kind of population decline that we're facing now. The UN Population Division, which is the world's foremost authority on predicting where the population and what the population currently is and where the population is going to be, and they have been saying now for a long time that their predictions were very, very optimistic, and that in actual fact, the global population will peak sometime in the next 50 to 60 years, and we don't know. We've never seen this kind of population slowdown, if you like. The only other cases have been plagues or catastrophic wars that have decimated populations in the past, and it's never been pretty. So, but we've never seen this kind of population decline absent some kind of catastrophic event, and frankly, we don't know what's ahead of us. We're really navigating in uncharted waters.
Well, if you peel back the years and you go back to the early 60s, where it was like, oh, wait a minute, you have a big family, you're using up a lot of resources. I mean, come on, you can't have 12 kids. 2 kids is fine. And then we saw the single parent household where you have only 1 kid. And then now you have the push of the abortion movement. Now you throw in on top of that the new transgender movement that is taking away the fertility of our youth in exchange for whatever flavor of the month it is. There are so many different assaults in our society that it's a wonder that we even have children being born.
No, it seems the only ones who want to have children are transgenders nowadays. That's a fact. It is problematic as a society, and I'm not saying this just from a point of view of a religious standpoint or a moral standpoint, but it really is also a really social and economic crisis, because there is simply no example anywhere in the world of a population being able to restore their fertility to above replacement once it dips below replacement, and that's catastrophic. Right now, the German economy has been in recession for 5 years because their labor force has declined. Our own labor force is now beginning to decline here in the United States. Is the recession that we are now experiencing just a coincidence? Probably not. But there's this sacred cow of the small family norm and sexual autonomy that has simply prevented us even from talking about the demographic problem, which is why, kudos to Elon Musk and others who've been brave enough to talk about it. But you don't hear the media talking about it in any serious way.
Now, what is the number, the figure for population? What was the word I'm thinking of?
Replacement.
Replacement. Thank you very much. I thought it was like 1.5.
So
if you go below that, then you're in trouble.
No, if you go below 2.1, you're below replacement. But even the replacement ideal, it's simply an ideal. I mean, it never really happens. In actual fact, and this is demographers have been studying this for more than 2 generations, and they've been showing that that population never grows. You know, is never at the same level. There's no way to maintain the population at the same level. The only way to do that is through coercion. And so in actual fact, population grows and declines in waves. And that's the normal course of population growth throughout history. There's no way to engineer that. But the fact is population or fertility has been trending downwards since the 1960s, since already before then, but it just precipitated after the 1960s. And now everywhere in the world, without exception, it is declining. The only places where population is above fertility, also there it is declining. So population fertility is simply declining, and there's no example anywhere in the world of a reversal of this. And now we have countries like Russia who are losing almost 100,000 people a year of their population. Their population is declining majorly. And you know, and that's why you see, you know, also the instability that we're seeing in the world as a result of Russian aggression. It certainly is tied into that fact also. And sociologists and demographers, economists are studying this issue and trying to resolve it, but they simply don't know how to reverse the trend. Once fertility declines, how do you convince a family to have more kids? How do you convince a woman that having kids is a possibility? It seems impossible nowadays, and it's more than just a question of you know, economic resources. It's more a question of cultural norms and social norms. I mean, one of the most interesting things about demography in recent decades is that most women will say that they would like to have more children, but are unable to. They're simply unable to, especially in Western countries. They've been unable to have more kids. And a lot of that is because they feel like they don't have the support that's necessary to have more kids, whether it's the intergenerational support, the social support, the economic support, whether it's because of social norms that frown upon motherhood and stay-at-home moms that force women into sort of having to juggle career and family, which inevitably makes it very hard on women. You know, can you have both? Can you have it all? Well, maybe for some women, but maybe not all women. So it's very hard to reverse the social norms that have now been totally assimilated in our culture and society, and we will now deal with the economic fallout of that, as well as the other social political consequences of it.
Well, the shift of having the female being the center of the family, being the one that nurtures, that raises, that teaches, suddenly it was, oh, you're too stupid. You know, you're stay-at-home mom. Here I am. I've got a career. I've got this. I've got that. I can afford this beautiful house because it's my money, and I don't have to have a man tell me. The change in the society that all of a sudden just downplayed the role that was so important. That was so important. And I think in some instance, the pandemic brought that full swing around. I think women are starting to see the role they need to play in the household to raise their children properly.
Well, you'd think so, except that if you look at the demographics, the fertility has dipped lower than ever before. It's now, you know, up until the pandemic, there were, you know, U.S. demographers were holding out, sort of, you know, there was sort of like American exceptionalism in demography. American demographers were maintaining that, we here in the United States, we would be able to sustain a stable population, that our fertility was not going to dip below 2.1 as the fertility in other Western countries, in particular Europe, and that we were exceptional in that regard. And, the pandemic has proven otherwise. And in actual fact, the pandemic has showed that we are just as weak demographically, if not weaker, than our cousins in Europe.
Now, the curious thing is, what is causing this drop in fertility? Is it because people are now taking all different types of medication for every single little ache and pain, which is changing their fertility rate? Is it because of the jab that everyone's being forced to take, and we're finding it does affect men's fertility as well as women's? Is there something in the environment that we're doing different than other countries are not doing? It's a lot of questions. Or is it because now we have been pushing this transgender ideal for so many decades, it's now taking the toll on our society? Or is it all the
I
above?
would say the transgender ideal, it's all the above in a sense, but the transgender ideal is simply the most recent and the most extreme manifestation of the social norms that have sort of underpinned much of our understanding of family and marriage and sexuality over the last 50 to 60 years. And it begins with generally a tolerance for unfettered sexual autonomy at a societal level, in the sense that nobody feels that anybody should be challenged on about their sexual behavior, whatever it is that they choose to do. And then it goes on to sort of look upon family formation as something entirely accidental, instead of being something essential to society. And the combination of these things with the sort of the idea that the pressure on women to have it all, in the sense of both be mothers in the fullest sense of the word, at the same time as being having trailblazing careers. That pressure has contributed to simply eroding the family norm that we had in the United States, 60, 70 years ago, and where now individuals simply do not feel like that's what they want, or they feel that even if it is what they want, they feel that because of the social norms around them, because of the economic reality, because of the tax situation or whatever, they cannot engage in sort of informing their ideal family and having more kids. I mean, think about it this way: having children is a sign of a culture of hope in the future, of hope for yourself, of love, for others, and we've propagated a culture of consumerism where you think only of what's in it for me, and this culture is completely at odds with the family and the reality of the family and what the family needs, what children need in a family. So so in a way, the most extreme, you could say, manifestation of this exaltation of sexual autonomy is really the transgender movement, where it's simply we can't just challenge anybody about what they're doing with their sexuality. We can't challenge them about what they're thinking about themselves either.
Well, you said a lot in that little bit that we can always expand on for the next 3 hours, but we don't have you for the next 3 hours. But we have become a disposable society. But what I've noticed also is a disconnected society. You have people that are so involved in their smart devices and their social media, they no longer know how to interact interpersonally. And that, I think, is also a big contributing factor to our population drop. If you cannot relate to your fellow human being and see them as someone as equal as you are, with the same feelings, the same desires as you have, you become insulated. It's you are there, and then the world just exists around you. You're the center of the universe. Instead of having people have an interaction to treat each other with respect and dignity, and then to be able to fall in love and then say, hey, this is great. Let's start a family and let the kids feel this. And let's bring around hope, as you said. But we've become so disposable and so set in our social networks and our smart devices, they don't know how to interact with a fellow human being.
I couldn't agree more. And, we saw a little bit of this with the sort of the video game culture, even millennials and, even the Gen Xers in a sense, before the millennials. There was a lot of people who grew up playing video games, and that affected them socially in the sense they're addicted to video games. They didn't really learn to socialize in the same way as previous generations because of that. And now we're seeing this at a mass scale throughout society because of cell phones. And yes, without a doubt, it's having an effect it's going to have a huge effect on kids' ability to grow up in a healthy social way, and then to interact healthily with others, including with the ability of forming a family and realizing their full potential as human being in that regard. So it's very sad, and without a doubt, it's hard to think that cell phones have only been around or the smartphones anyway, for the last 10 years, and they've had such a huge impact on this next generation that is coming up. And I see it firsthand with the teenagers I've been involved with, and through the work in my own parish. And yes, without a doubt, they need to be helped. They need to be helped.
Yeah, I had one of our visiting pastors in our church come over to our house one day. My husband had been really ill, and he came over to minister to him. And we started talking, and he handled the youth ministry. And his comment was, these kids don't know how to look you in the eye and shake your hand, much less fill out a job application. I went through the grocery store line a number of years back, and those little plastic dividers to put your groceries on one side and your person behind you on the other side. Well, as she's scanning everything through, she starts to try to scan that divider. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm not buying that. That divides the groceries from my set and her set. They don't even understand the social skills for that. And this is the generation where these are the kids we're coming out of our public school system. Now, I think parents are starting to realize how bad our education system is. And if we can get more parents involved in the education system, and maybe more homeschooling, more private schooling, more religious schooling, and get them out of the public system, I think we have a chance.
Well, there'll be certainly a chance to have a minority that is culturally relevant, socially, that can be a source of social renewal. But I do think that in the coming years, the picture is bleak, and we have to brace ourselves for the worst and be prepared and be realistic about what's ahead of us. And yes, in many ways, create those spaces, those truly safe spaces, in the real sense of the word safe, for our kids to grow up, so that we can have a possibility to help society in the future. Because just to go along with what's going along now in schools and in society more broadly is the death knell of our own families.
Well, do you find in your church, if you have to teach these youths basic social skills?
Yes, but thankfully there's ways to do it that is fun for them as well, and they learn a lot.
Now, I have another question, because this is a little bit off the beaten path, because it just flitted through this wacky mind of mine. How much does autism, the growth of autism in our society, affected what we're talking about now, here and now? The social skills, as well as, the population
Oh, I don't know about that. That's I'm not sure even how I would relate the two, but I'm not aware of a connection there. I am aware of of autism as a growing phenomenon and growing awareness about it, especially. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure the connection with population issues more broadly.
That would be something interesting to look into. Well, Stefano, it is a pleasure to have you here. You definitely have to come back on and come back on soon because there's so much more to talk about. You've got some really great, interesting articles up on c-fam.org. One of them dealing with homosexual and transgender issues backfiring in some of the Western states, such as the Muslim countries. The other one I loved a lot was the Netherlands human right record criticized because of euthanasia and abortion. And I urge people to go onto that website and read your articles over there and find out more about what you're doing there.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. And God bless you for the hard work you do, sir.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Stefano Gennarini over at cfam.org. And we've got my buddy from the Epoch Times or the Epic Times, as well as with Hill Faith. I always get that backwards. My buddy, Mark Tapscott. Mark, how are you today?
I'm great, Ann. How are you?
Hey.
I'm busier than one-armed paper hanger.
Well, if you hear thunder in the background, it's because we're having quite a thunderstorm here.
Oh, we had one earlier that just, the second that it hit, it sounded like it was right in my front yard. I saw 5 cats go literally flying up in the air and scatter in 5 different directions. So, oh yeah, we've got a lot of thunderstorms coming through the area. Holy cow.
Global warming. Global warming.
Global warming, yeah.
Global warming.
Oh, man. I've got to get my articles here in line because I was printing out stuff just last minute. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. You wrote an article on the Epoch Times about billions that's supposed to be meant for small businesses, but it seems to be heading to China and Russia. And Open the Books has a great follow-up on that one. What the heck is going on, and what is our government doing to us that we're not paying attention to?
Well, Ann, it's kind of ironic. 7 years ago, the Republicans who controlled Congress at the time were very upset with the Export-Import Bank precisely because the billions of dollars that it gets every year from the U.S. taxpayer are supposed to go primarily to help U.S. small businesses, sell their products overseas. But instead, most of it, literally most of it, goes to the Boeing Corporation. Whenever they sell a bunch of new airliners to a company in a foreign country, they are able to get loan guarantees through the EXIM Bank. And of course, that's a huge boost to Boeing. The Bechtel Corporation also takes advantage of that.
Well, I just want to say how much that Boeing had gotten between 2007 and 2021. This number is absolutely phenomenal. $66,434,545,437.09. You can't forget the 9 cents.
Yeah.
66 billion?
Well, don't forget, this primarily is in the form of loan guarantees. And the thing about it that is so frustrating is frequently the company that is getting the loan guarantees for sales or to buy something from Boeing is in a place like China or Russia or Nigeria or Turkey. Those are 4 of the 6 foreign countries that have benefited the most from the EXIM Bank. So the Republicans were so upset with it in 2015 that they allowed the charter of the bank to expire.
Mm-hmm.
And, you would think, well, that would be the end of the XM Bank. But somebody made a deal someplace, and 5 months later, the Republicans agreed to re-up it, and it's still here, and it's still doing the same thing.
Now, can we trace back who ended up re-upping it? Was it the Republicans? Was it the Democrats? Was it both?
Well, you'll recall in 2015, President Barack Obama was still in office, and the Republicans had a small majority in the Senate, a fairly significant majority in the House. And if I recall correctly, the reinstituting the charter of the XM Bank was part of a budget agreement at the end of the year. So, it was one of these things that was used as leverage to get other things that people want. That's politics in Washington. My point in citing that is you have these huge government institutions that consume billions and billions of dollars, tax dollars every year. And periodically, one of them will get in trouble in so much trouble, so much bad publicity and exposure that Congress will have to do something. But even then, the pressures to bring it back, they never stop. They never stop lobbying to bring it back. And that's why it's so difficult to make big government smaller. That's why Ronald Reagan said the closest thing to eternal life we'll see here on Earth is a federal program.
Yeah, or a federal agency. Then that's eternal employment. But, you look at the countries that benefited, 17.5 billion to Mexico, another 7.2 billion to India, Saudi Arabia almost 7 billion, United Emirates 6.5 billion, China over 6 billion, Turkey over 6, Ireland, South Korea, Australia, and Brazil. And then you look at the banks. J.P. Morgan Chase is the biggest with 23 billion in lending. Oh my God. And you look at this money and how much of this is American taxpayer dollars?
Well, it's all that way. I mean, it is loan guarantees based on appropriated funds in the XM Bank's coffers. And, people who invest in these companies that are benefiting from the XM make a lot of money on it. And, it would be nice if once in a while they would at least tell us thank you.
Now, I thought the XM Bank was supposed to be an international bank, but the American taxpayers foot the whole bill?
It is, but yes, it is a U.S. government agency. There are 386 employees that work at the XM Bank, and they are federal employees.
This is scary, because here we have a whole banking system within our government, but isn't that what the Federal Reserve is supposed to be?
Well, it's a particular program set up to function like a bank for a particular purpose, and that particular purpose, as you mentioned at the outset, is supposed to help small businesses. But as so frequently happens, that's not the way it actually operates.
So, small businesses, forget it. You're not going to exist anymore here in the United States because only big corporations or foreign corporations are going to be the only things out here. It's going to be the Wally World of the world.
Open the books when they did their analysis of the XM Bank. They found that only about 23%, or about $1 of every 5 that XM makes available goes to small businesses. And I have to confess, when I first read that in the Open the Books report, I was surprised that it was that much, because I would have expected it to be even smaller than that.
Now, when they say small business, they're not talking about the mom and pop making cupcakes on the corner. What are they talking about when they say small business?
I'm not sure what the employee ceiling is. I think it's like 500. And compared to Boeing, which has I think 26,000 employees, that's a small business.
Now, a 500-person business to us is a big business, but depending upon what they do, and what the products they're offering that is available worldwide, and that could be very lucrative for a small business, but it's not.
Absolutely, and create jobs.
Now, it's mind-boggling. It is absolutely mind-boggling how our government finds way to spend our dollars and make us feel happy about it. Just excuse me, I'll bend over and you do whatever you want, and I'm going to say thank you, sir. You don't have to buy me dinner. That's all right, but that's the American taxpayer.
Yep. Unfortunately, that's the way it is.
At least give me a kiss, Oh, man. You look at all these things that you've been reporting on recently about the grants and everything else that's going on with our government. I had no idea that there are grants out there to help support atheism overseas. Now, what are we doing that for?
Isn't that amazing? The State Department issued a notice of a competitive grant for the purpose of promoting the protection of religious freedom, particularly with reference to atheism, humanism, and it listed some other belief systems that are extremely rare. And each of the grants are available at up to $500,000. These are going to go to international organizations, NGOs, associated with the United Nations. And as soon as the people in Congress, Republicans in Congress, heard about this, they said, wait a minute. If you were sending these $500,000 grants out to promote Christianity, there would be all kinds of protests. But here you are promoting atheism with U.S. tax dollars. What's going on? And, Congressman Jim Banks, who is the chairman of the Republican Study Committee in the House, and 17 of his colleagues, other House Republicans, sent a letter to the Secretary of State, Antoni Blinken, saying, what's going on here? And the State Department hasn't responded. When I asked the State Department this week, yes, Curtis.
Oh, go ahead and finish. I'll wait.
I'm sorry?
He said,
well, I was just going to say, I was just going to say, isn't it true that under Obama, NASA was tasked with promoting Islam?
Yes.
That's how crazy it's gotten.
I don't think NASA is still doing that, because one of my fellow Oklahomans became the administrator of NASA under Donald Trump. Oh, there's a big boom. Did you guys hear that?
I heard something in the background.
No, boy, I'll tell you, that was a big one. That was a boomer. Anyway, I'm pretty sure they discontinued that program. But then you have the State Department come along with this one, and they refuse to provide any information about it. So, as Congressman Banks said in his letter to Blinken, if you guys won't talk about this, it leads to the conclusion that you're up to something. And so we've got to know what. And they have now told the State Department to preserve all of the documents that are connected with this particular grant program. And that's a diplomatic way of saying, as soon as we get the majority come November, we're going to investigate this. So don't destroy anything. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. Because one of the paragraphs in there says it's one thing for the department to be tolerant and respectful of a wide range of belief systems and to encourage governments to respect the religious freedom interests of their citizens. It's quite another for the United States government to work actively to empower atheists, humanists, non-practicing, and non-affiliated in public decision-making. Any such program for
Yes.
any religiously identifiable group in the United States would be unconstitutional. In addition to its constitutionality, dubious legal foundation. We also question how such a grant or cooperative agreement program advances the foreign policy interests of the United States.
Yeah, the really puzzling thing about this is if the grant was to encourage respect for religious freedom, simply just for religious freedom, I suspect nobody would have any problems with that because, regardless of what your religious perspective is, or even if you have no religious perspective, it ought to be respected by government. So nobody would be upset with that. But to specifically say to respect freedom of religion for atheism, humanism, et cetera, that raises all kinds of red flags. And I suspect we will be hearing more about this particular program early in 2023.
Oh, absolutely. There has been an attack on Christianity and Judaism on a blanket scale here under this administration, and no one's saying anything. But heaven forbid you turn around and protest against a mosque. No, that's all right. But if you're a Christian or you're Jewish, you are fair game. And if the atheists come after the Christians and the Jews, it's no problem. So our government is promoting religious intolerance.
Well, and even beyond that, and there's been a tremendous increase in the violence against pregnancy centers that are intended to help women who are pregnant and need help and don't want to get an abortion. They don't want to kill their babies. And there's been a huge increase in physical attacks on those facilities and the people who work in them. And the Justice Department has acknowledged that that's a problem, but so far there's no evidence that they're actually doing anything to investigate it and determine who's behind it and bring those people to justice. You also have situations like with the Biden administration's new regulation to condition the receipt of the federally supported free lunch program in schools. The schools have to do certain things to promote LGBTQ interest. And there is in particular one private Christian school, I think in Tampa, that has gone to federal court because they're saying, look, you're requiring us to advance and promote values that are contrary to our religious faith. We can't do that, and yet we do want to feed these kids, and that is discrimination against Christianity. So you're right. The Biden administration is doing a lot of things that probably 25 years ago, even everybody in this country would be amazed if the government had tried to do it.
Well, I thought that the religious school issue had been resolved with that one school with the playground, where they weren't allowing to use federal government funds to put this surface cover on it that would have been far safer for the children. Couldn't use, government funds to do that because if it's a religious institute.
Right.
And yet, the government is saying that even though you're a religious institute, you have to teach what is exactly against your beliefs. The assault on faith is unbelievable. Well, I didn't.
Ann, go ahead.
They did it with the bathrooms. Because you have to have a transgender bathroom. You have to allow the boys to go into the girls and the girls go into the boys. It doesn't matter if there's sexual assaults or if it's against the religious faith. But I thought, again, that was settled. And it's obviously it's not. The government just turns around and says, we don't care what court precedent is. We're just going to do whatever we feel like doing.
Well, that's the thing about having, a huge government bureaucracy that's involved in regulating every aspect of our daily life. You think you get one of these issues resolved with regard to one thing, one area, the playground issue, for example, and up pops the same issue with regard to something else, in this case, to the promoting LGBTQ values, or you don't have the federal lunch program, free lunch program. It's like a whack-a-mole program, the bureaucrats and the liberals, you beat them on one place, and lo and behold, 2 seconds later, there they are up in another place. You beat them down on that one, and then they come up someplace else. So, as a result, people who believe in the limited government and the constitutional values that have made this country great are constantly on the defensive because government is so big, there are so many different ways that liberals and progressives can attack our freedom.
Man, now to shift gears a little bit more, a number of years ago, there was a scientist, Chinese, working in an American lab that got themselves into a lot of trouble for spying for China. And lo and behold, there's a bill that the GOP is putting out telling the U.S. national labs to polygraph Chinese or Russian applicants that don't have green cards. Now, how the heck are you going to get a job? Oh, wait a minute. Are they here legally or illegally? Without a green card in the most highly sensitive area in our government, our labs. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. It's Chinese. They already stealing our intellectual property and our technology. So let's just give it away to them for free. Don't worry about that.
Yes, stealing us blind. That is one of the most amazing stories I've seen in a long time. The fact that the U.S. national labs, Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, and so forth, where incredible research and development is done by these. There's 17 of them across the country. The fact that these people have to be told, wait a minute, if you've got somebody applying for a job in a sensitive research area or sensitive national security area, they're from Russia or China or one of these countries of concern, and they don't have a green card, then you ought to be asking questions about why they want this job here, and you ought to be thinking twice about whether or not you're going to hire them. And yet, they have to. They have to be told that. And a couple of Republican senators, Senator Marshall from Kansas, and I believe Senator, who's the other one? I'm suddenly drawing. Yeah, Barrasso from Wyoming have this bill that says to the national labs, you have to do this. You have to give them a polygraph, and you have to investigate their background. You have to know who they are, where they're from, whether or not they have conflicts of interest, for example, with Chinese or Russian interest. And then you have to think very carefully about whether you're going to hire them.
Now, this comes down to a report back in 2019 to the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, a permanent investigation subcommittee. Boy, that is a mouthful. Where it dealt with individual N, the letter N. Tell us about individual N. Well,
individual N hosted a bunch of he was a Chinese national, hosted a bunch of other Chinese nationals at one of the energy labs. Actually, they showed up at several of the energy labs. And individual N was hired by the lab, one of the labs, and then hired himself 4 more Chinese nationals, several of whom were participants in this Chinese program the 1,000 Talents program, which basically is a cover for industrial espionage by Chinese spies. Brought in 4 of these people, and 8 others were also involved. He involved them in various and sundry ways in the activities that he was conducting at the energy lab. You had this guy. They knew he was there. They knew what he was doing, but they hadn't done anything. And I think he's still employed at the one of the labs. I could be wrong about that, but I think he is.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. The average Joe Blow, you and I, if we decide to go be employed, we have to go through a background check. You run the Social Security number, and then the business is audited to make sure that they have people that are not there illegally. However, if you're an illegal alien, or if you're a member of one of our enemy governments, don't worry about it. You get a free pass. We just turn our back.
Yeah.
Because some of the nations that you write about include Burma, Eritrea, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. I mean, why don't you just throw the doors open and say, here are all of our secrets, and we no longer have any domestic security or sovereignty. We're just part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned one of the countries on the list is Pakistan, and the Pakistani intelligence service is notorious for being able to insert people in critically important programs in the U.S. and other countries in the West. And that can very easily become a conduit for information that is of value to terrorists like Al-Qaeda. And here we are. We still have this problem. You would think all these years after 9/11, this kind of thing would no longer be a problem, but there it is.
Yeah, and we've got thousands of Chinese and Russian foreign nationals working in the Department of Energy. So it's not just the labs.
Yep.
It's throughout the rest of our government. Anywhere there's vital information.
Yep. And they know why they're there. They're doing it on purpose, and it's not for our best interest.
No, I don't think there's very much that our government's doing that is in our best interest, because now they're trying to pass and fast track this new bill for the U.S. semiconductor factories. Oh, wait a minute. It's supposed to be for U.S. making chips, but somehow or other it ends up benefiting China and India, doesn't it?
Well, this particular bill is our Senator Haggerty from Tennessee pushed this. Basically, what it does is it fast tracks the regulatory approval for construction of a new semiconductor factory here. The reason that's important is because one of the reasons why it's so costly in America to build any kind of a factory, much less a semiconductor factory, is the regulatory approval process. You have to jump through the hoops, and it can take 7 to 10 years under the present situation. And, why jump through all those hoops when China is saying, hey, come on over here to China and you can build your factory for virtually nothing. You do have to share all your technology with us, but, we've got cheap labor and we've got cheap land, and you can really make a lot of money here. So the idea behind this bill from Senator Haggerty is great. Let's reduce the cost of building a semiconductor factory here in the States and make that an incentive to do it here in the States rather than taking those jobs and that technology overseas, especially take it overseas to China.
But what's the unintended consequence?
But, well, one of the consequences is you have still other incentives in place, and the whole culture, if you will, in the corporate business community in America that, China's the biggest market in the world. We got to be there now. We got to make the money now, or we're going to lose out. So this is one issue among a number of issues that needs, the people in America need to think about very carefully. Do we want our jobs here in the U.S., or do we want to ship them overseas to China? That's a big issue.
Yeah. I mean, cheap products coming out of China, but then again, Lord knows what China's putting into those products that is not beneficial for us as a country, us as a government, and us as individuals. How much of our medication is coming out of China, and Lord knows what is being put into that medication. Not just the semiconductors, the clothing.
Yep.
You go into Wally World, and dare you to find yourself a made in America product. It's all made in China, Vietnam, not made in the United States. But
yep, that's true.
We've got to wake up. I know you only have a few moments left with us, so I want to ask you about Governor Ron DeSantis. Oh, God bless him. He is the gift that just keeps on giving. He was offered to go on The View, and boy, did he give it back to them both barrels. And what's the word out there that you're hearing?
Well, I tell you, I've covered DeSantis when he was a member of the House of Representatives, and it was very clear very early on he is an unusual talent. He is very straightforward. He's very firm, and he knows how to deal with people who are double talking like government bureaucrats, et cetera, et cetera. And what he did yesterday in relieving that prosecutor in Tampa County, I guess it is, a George Soros prosecutor who wouldn't prosecute crime. That's the kind of decisive action that DeSantis is known for, and it's the kind of leadership that I think an awful lot of people in this country, Democrats and Republicans, they want to see more of that. Make a decision, do something, and do it on an issue like crime that we're all concerned about.
Yes. Well, Mark, people can find you.
He's going to be around.
Yeah, he's young. People can find you at the Epoch Times. They go the EPOCH, theepochtimes.com. You always got great articles out there, and we will see you back here again in 2 weeks. Enjoy your weekend and a little time off from me.
Yep, good. And take care, Curtis. Take care.
All right, take care.
All right, take care, Mark.
All right, check out Mark Tapscott's articles over at the Epoch Times. Love having him on every other week. Now, welcoming back to our show and our final half hour, the last victim of the day, we want to welcome back from the Heritage Foundation, E.J. Antoni. And I got all these nice Italians today. My grandmother's just up in heaven, just bouncing up and down. I know you got good guys here today. Good afternoon, EJ. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I mean, this world we have today is getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And hopefully you can help us make a little sense of this. You wrote a recent article about the return of stagflation. We hear inflation, we hear a possible recession, but what is stagflation so people can understand where we are and what's happening today?
Sure. Well, it was a term that was first coined back in the 1970s to describe this odd combination of both stagnant economic growth as well as high inflation. In other words, exactly what we're seeing today. And unfortunately, all of these problems are essentially self-inflicted wounds. These are the results of bad government policies, both at the Federal Reserve as well as Congress and the White House.
I actually opened up my first business in the 70s. And I remember Jimmy Carter, and I never thought I would see an economy as bad as what Jimmy Carter produced. And yet we're seeing it far worse, aren't we?
No, that's exactly right. And I mean, it's really amazing how out of touch the White House seems to be, the entire administration really, when they talk about how wonderful the economy is, and they seemingly just fail to acknowledge the American people's financial sufferings right now. And they really don't seem to appreciate just how much this inflation is impacting the average person here in America.
You know, I've got a county council meeting I'm going to be descending upon along with members of my Tea Party. Yes, we still exist in 2009, and yes, we do end up organizing ourselves. Out of all the things that these clowns want to do is to increase the sales tax. Now, we've got stagflation. We've got record high inflation numbers. The unemployment rate is continuing to climb. We're heading towards a recession. Prices are increasing. Even though gas prices may be starting to drop a little bit, it's not going to be for long unless we start producing it real soon here at home. And they want to have an increase of a 1% sales tax. Do you see a problem for that at all?
Oh, certainly. I mean, the last thing you want to do right now is raise taxes. You should be cutting taxes, cutting spending, and cutting regulation. You know, the difference between the Great Depression and the very short recession in 1980, 1981, the key difference there was the fact that you had Ronald Reagan, who again cut taxes, cut spending, cut regulation as best he could, versus the anti-supply side policies, if you will, that were imposed under the Hoover and then the Roosevelt administration in the late 1920s and, well, really the 1930s. So the difference between a short recession and a prolonged and severe downturn really has to do with the government response. But I do want to make one quick correction. You brought up the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate actually hasn't been going up. It's been going down, but not for the right reason. It's not just because more people are getting jobs, but it's because people are leaving the labor force.
Yeah.
In the jobs report that just came out today, we actually saw that the labor force participation rate, which helps tell us how many people are working and are looking for work, that actually went down in this last report, not up.
No, the question would be, how many are of marketable age, working age, that are no longer working and living on the government dole? That should be put into the unemployment numbers. It used to be when you went and got your unemployment check, you had to prove that you're actively out there looking for work. Today you don't. You get a little debit card and, hey, you just keep on collecting. It doesn't matter whether you're looking anymore or not. That's why I'm saying that the numbers are actually, in reality, far higher than they are being reported.
No, certainly. And, especially since the Biden administration has removed some of the different work requirements for various welfare programs, that has certainly incentivized people to stay on those programs longer than necessary, or to get on those programs when they need not be on them in the first place. And that is not at all helping the labor market shortage that we're also seeing right now, where many businesses can't find workers.
No, they can't. And you try going into any restaurant, seeing they're all understaffed. You go into a lot of other businesses, service businesses, all understaffed. And I'm finding also people are starting to work off the books, under the table, because they don't want the government, to cut off their benefits. So they're double dipping. There's a lot of ways to fudge the numbers if you sit down and actually look at them. But this seems to be...
another thing that we saw...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, finish up, please.
No, another thing that we saw in the latest jobs report was that the number of people who are working multiple jobs, that keeps increasing. And one of the things that does is it helps boost that headline jobs number that we see, because that number only surveys businesses, and what it does is it allows for double counting. In other words, if you and I, let's say we have multiple jobs, we work at different businesses, each time those different businesses get surveyed, they say that they have a person working for them, except it's the same person. And that is, I think, artificially boosting some of these numbers.
And I'm wondering how much this administration or those behind the administration know that and are using it to game the system, especially going into the midterm elections?
It's a great question. It's probably a little out of my wheelhouse, but certainly there are a lot of political implications to all of these reports and to all of these numbers. And I know the White House does make they put forth a considerable amount of effort to point out whenever the numbers are in their favor, but they certainly ignore them when they are not in their favor. You'll recall a couple of months ago, they pointed out that among different minority groups, the unemployment rate had fallen pretty dramatically, but they were completely silent today when the unemployment rate for blacks went up and the number of blacks employed went down. Somehow they were completely silent on that point.
That's amazing. The numbers that work this way, and then we don't talk about them if they go that way. But I was watching last night, and I was really finally surprised that the left finally gets that something is not exactly right in Denmark. This new, I barely can even say this without cracking up, Inflation Reduction Act. When you get left liberal newscasters making fun of it, there's something wrong with the bill, isn't there?
No, that's exactly right. And, this is really a prime example of deceptive marketing. In fact, I would go so far to say that if a private institution had marketing so deceptive, they would most likely be hauled into court for violating the law. This bill will do the exact opposite of what its name says. It will exacerbate price increases. It includes taxes on energy, for example. Well, people really underappreciate the fact that energy affects everything we do and everything we buy. And as you increase the price of energy, you end up increasing the price for everything else. So this will only, again, exacerbate price increases. Those essentially higher taxes are going to be borne out mostly by the middle and working classes. So once again, this is yet another violation of the president's promise not to raise taxes on those making less than $400,000 a year.
So, you raise the price.
I think their focus.
I'm sorry, Curtis. You raise the price of energy, which means gasoline, propane or natural gas, electricity, and go on down the line. So, all right, your household expenses go up, and the cost to run either your electric or your gas-powered vehicle are going to go up. But when you look at it, the cost to produce the products that you will buy, food and other durable products, will go up. The cost to run your schools, your public buildings, the hospitals, the emergency service will go up. Every single item will go up no matter what, except for walking outside and breathing fresh air.
And another thing that people really, I think, underappreciate is people really have this idea in their head that corporations pay taxes. Corporations don't pay any taxes. Okay, we talk about the corporate tax rate, but a corporation is not a person. Only people can pay taxes. When a corporation pays taxes, that just means that it gets passed along to actual people. How does that work? Well, if you're a customer, the corporation ends up charging you a higher price. If you're an employee, the corporation ends up giving you a lower wage. And if you're a shareholder, the corporation ends up giving you a lower return on your investment. Only people can pay taxes. And so another thing that this bill wants to do is to increase the taxes paid by corporations. Well, you're just playing a shell game. Once again, all you're doing is taking more money from the American people. You're just hiding how you're doing it.
Well, all corporations do, and having owned numerous businesses, you take the money from your customer, you put a portion of it aside that goes into either a separate account or whatever. You just allocate a portion aside, and when it's time to remit those taxes, you're taking the money that your customer gave you out of the account and writing the check. So yes, the business in effect does not pay tax. They're just passing on what they collected from you to the government. So in the end, it's the average day Joe and Blow, you and me, that pay that additional 15% on every single thing.
No, that's exactly right. But unfortunately, not a lot of people truly understand how all that works. A lot of people have not been business owners, for example. And when we hear these talking points out of Washington, D.C. about these big, bad, evil corporations, right, and the greedy people who run them, a lot of people, I think, buy into those talking points. And they're in favor then of these corporate income tax increases. But then they're wondering, hey, why are the prices for the things I'm buying going up? Why am I getting paid less at my job? Or why is my 401k, if I'm fortunate enough to have one, why is it not doing as well as it used to? And this is exactly why.
You need the straw man argument. You need someone to blame so you look good. You put these things into place and, oh, it's not my fault. It's their fault. Oh, it's not Biden's fault. It's Trump's fault. He left us with this. And that's what they do. It's the straw man argument.
No, but if we really want to get into a comparison of Trump versus Biden, I would love to have that discussion. You look at something like how is the average person doing under Trump? Well, look at what their income could actually buy. Not only did their incomes go up a lot under Trump, but inflation stayed very low, so that the average worker gained the equivalent of about $4,000 in annual income from when Trump first took office to when he left office. What about with President Biden? It's gone exactly the opposite direction. In fact, in only 18 months, it's gone down by almost as much. It's gone down $3,400. In other words, Biden has managed in 18 months to almost wipe out 4 years worth of gains that the average worker saw under President Trump.
Before Biden took office, you could buy a loaf of bread for 99 cents. And when you go in there, you're looking at $3.99, $4.50. I had a friend of mine, he's on his Social Security, took him shopping, and he had to put items back on the shelf because he was now counting pennies, where 2 years before, he didn't have to do that. And even his rent is going up because the cost to the landlord has gone up. It's the tiniest guy, the lowest guy in the rung that is being hit the hardest. And who in this administration is getting that message and doing anything about it? No one. But we're going to come up with these programs, Inflation Reduction Act, and get it passed so that you feel good. And like we did something, and we can go in November and say, we did this and you should be happy. Gee.
Yes, and unfortunately.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I often wonder how poor people are making it in this economy when working people are struggling. And I found out a little information from some of my family members that are dependent on the government. And from what I'm being told, instead of getting food stamps once a month and wages, which is nothing but the welfare check, they're getting it twice a month now, but quietly. So that's how they're getting along. You don't hear too much coming from that community.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're wondering how is the average American making it today, in a lot of ways they're not. The amount of gasoline that's being sold has just plummeted. Why? Because people can't afford it anymore. People are having to scale back what they're spending money on. We just got some credit card data today, and we're seeing that essentially the amount that people are having to put on credit cards is rising on a percentage basis by double digits. People are dipping into savings. The average person is really taking it on the chin with these higher prices, and they don't have many options in terms of how to deal with it other than just having to cut back. Well, what's the effect of that on the economy? As people buy fewer goods and services, businesses are selling less, and the economy is shrinking. Exactly what we've seen over the last 6 months. And pretty soon we're going to start having some pretty widespread layoffs, because if you're a business and you're not selling as much, then guess what? You don't need as many employees, and that just makes it even worse.
Well, now we can add now to the Inflation Reduction Act the Build Back Better. And that is even scarier because there's a large elderly population taking a lot of medications, and I being one of them. Gee, I'm like, I'm already paying a lot. And I had my friend, he had to try to find out how he could pay for some of his medication, which was almost $300 for one prescription. This Build Back Better is not all that much better.
No, not at all. And unfortunately, going back to this idea of deceptive marketing, they talk about things like how they will lower prescription drug prices. No, they are not going to lower prescription drug prices. They're going to do things like create either shortages of drugs, or it's going to result in lower quality drugs being brought to market, or it will reduce innovation in the drug market, meaning fewer new and life-saving drugs are going to be actually created and are going to be brought to market so that you and I can buy them. So once again, the name says one thing and the reality says exactly the opposite. And unfortunately, very often people judge things either by the name or by their intention and not the actual result.
Well, we already have a big regulation market on new drugs. I mean, first they have to develop them, then they have to test them, then they have to go through the FDA approval. And it's not something that can happen overnight. This takes years. That's a lot of money to invest in a single product. But yet these drug companies do that because of the profit margin that allows them to do it. You take away that profit margin, and as you said, what is the incentive to create a new and better drug?
Right. And you know what? The oil market actually works very, very similarly. What I mean by that is when you have to build something like a refinery that's going to cost you billions and billions of dollars, and then it's going to be several years before you even break even on that, and that's assuming that oil stays at a certain price point. There are a lot of contingencies involved there. There are a lot of things that you are not going to be sure about, a lot of uncertainties. And so when this administration comes out and promises to literally end your industry within the decade, why on earth would you invest? Why on earth would you increase production? Why on earth would you build a new refinery? Would you increase output? I mean, people don't even want to do regularly scheduled maintenance. They'd rather just start slowly shutting plants down. And what's that doing to supply? It's putting a choke collar around the neck of our domestic energy industries, and the result is lower supply, less energy, and higher prices.
Now, wait a minute. Didn't Biden just sell some of our oil reserves to China?
Oh no, that's exactly right. But see, that actually is a very good illustration of the point. Why on earth is all of this money why on earth is all of this oil going to China? It's because we can't even use it here, because the bottleneck is not in crude, the bottleneck is in refining, at least at the moment, which again is another reason why dumping all of this crude oil onto the market just doesn't make sense. But it has to do with the marketing. Once again, just like the naming behind this latest bill, it is a way for the administration to try to make it appear as though they are doing something, even if it doesn't actually do anything, or perhaps even makes the problem worse.
Yeah, this administration has done exactly everything wrong, the exact opposite of what to do to get us out of this inflation. Actually, we're actually, in truth, in a recession, aren't we?
No, we definitely are. We've had 2 quarters in a row where the economy contracted, right? That's the classic definition for a recession. But honestly, beyond that, I mean, the American people understand what's going on. They have been living through this for the last 18 months. They have seen their paychecks, even though they're getting larger, they can see that their paychecks buy less in terms of goods and services. The American people are the ones having to face the decision, do I buy groceries or gasoline today, right? I mean, you can't fool people just by changing the definition of words.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Don't they do that all the time? Oh, come on.
Oh, no, they certainly do, right? They've redefined vaccine, they've redefined women, they redefined inflation, and now they're redefining recession. So, no, it's certainly par for the course, but just because it didn't work then, it still doesn't work now.
Well, people can find your fantastic articles over at Heritage Foundation, which is heritage.org. And I enjoy always having you, the economy is not something sexy to talk about, but when it hits you in your wallet and you go to the grocery store or you go to get something, your clothes for your kids for school, and you see that price tag and something that may have cost you $20 is now double the price, then the American people, the public, is going to wake up and smell the coffee. And I think they're starting to right now.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, once again, sometimes it takes really, really bad times to give us really good times. Ronald Reagan didn't just fall out of the sky. It took a Jimmy Carter to give us a Ronald Reagan, and that might be where we're at right now.
I think so. I really think so. But we've got to survive another 2 years. EJ, is always a pleasure to have you on, and God bless you for the hard work you do there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is our pleasure. Check out EJ Antoni over at heritage.org. That's all we got for now, Curtis. I'm going to see if we can get Harlan back on next week. It seems that we had a problem with his phone number. So I'm going to call AJ and find out what is going on with that and see if we can get him rebooked for next week. Because his book, The Fifth Horseman and the New Mad, falls into everything we just discussed today. Everything we discussed is part of his book, and it would have been great to have him on there. It would have wrapped everything up really nicely. Wow. But we're glad that the ambassador was able to stay with us for a full hour instead of just the half hour. So thank you for that. So that's all we got for now for today. Be careful if you're on the East Coast. There is a string of thunderstorms coming through here. 2 people were killed in the lightning strike that hit 4 people in Washington, D.C. at the White House. So please be careful out there. And Curtis, we're going to leave everyone with the song from my friend Gary Pecorella, Save America. So until then, I thank everyone for joining us, and I say good night and God bless.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe God we trust. And the freedom my forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me to see the truth behind their lies. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue.
90 seconds.
For the friends I had loved and lost, and I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America.
60 seconds.
For the as we have loved and lost, when we still believe in God we trust, the freedom I found for His granted us.
10 seconds.
It's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save America.